I am thrilled to be here with you today to kick off our Advocacy Week 2024 trainings. So for those of you that don't know me, I'll do an intro slide later, but just to start off, my name is Amanda Martin. I'm the engagement manager for Solve. I'm so thrilled to have you all here. And today we're going to be focusing on storytelling. So for those of you that made it, welcome. Today is our first training, and it's about how to tell your story, which is really what you're doing in those advocacy sessions in your meetings. Training number 2 will be next Monday on what to expect in your meeting. Training 3 the following Monday on what are we advocating for. And the following Monday, April 8th, is really just more of a logistics. How do we use this app to log in and do all of our virtual meetings? Introducing the team, we have Emily Taylor. She's the Vice President of Advocacy and Engagement. And Emily's specialty is building, I'm gonna have to move the chat out of the way so I can read this, meeting with legislators ahead of time to build long-term relationships, driving programmatic decisions, and pushing advocacy efforts forward each year. If this is your first advocacy week, welcome. If it's your second, third, fourth, fifth, welcome back. If you don't already know Emily, I'm sure you soon will. She is an expert in the space. She is a guru of all things advocacy in the MECFS and long COVID space, and we're thrilled to have her leading the helm of our team here. Next is Monique Wyke. She is the advocacy manager. So she is the puppeteer, puppet master in the background, pulling all of these strings and making this happen, creating the relationships and the avenues that we need to be able to make those meetings with legislators so that you can tell your stories. And myself, as I mentioned, my name is Amanda Martin. I am the engagement manager for Solve. And my job is keeping the community connected, and I help support Advocacy Week. You may have already had some contact with Raquel Valencia. She's our Advocacy Week coordinator. Also, that is her email. She is your main point of contact for everything Advocacy Week. So if you have questions about how to use the app, confusion about your schedule, you're assigned a team lead and you want to know what that means, you have questions about our Ask Anything that you have, Raquel is your person to email and she will get back to you. She also just dropped her email into the chat. There's another place to get it. And you will be getting, you already have received, for those of you that are signed up already for Advocacy Week, you've received correspondence from her, and she will continue to be your main point of contact throughout this process. We're going to briefly go over the schedule of events so you can get an idea of when we're talking about these meetings, where they fall in your week. So Advocacy Week is Monday, April 15th through Friday, April 19th. On the 15th, we have Zoom office hours. So in addition to all of these 4 trainings, you will also have a coordination call that's region specific, and you'll receive more information about that. But that's a way to get to know your advocates in your geographic region of the United States. And in addition to that, you will also have Monday for any last minute questions that you have. If you want to practice your story, we'll go over how you can tell your story during meetings, and you want to practice pitching it or how you would present it, that's the place to go. If you have last minute questions on how you sign up or what's exactly expected of you, that's the place to go. So just know you will have a lot of opportunities to ask your questions and to figure out what needs to happen before you actually have your meetings. Tuesday is our Senate Advocacy Day. Wednesday is Social Media Action Day. Thursday is our House Advocacy Day. And Friday is Empower ME. So the Senate and the House days, those are the days you're actually meeting with your legislators' offices. So those are pretty much what we're really prepping for. That's the big deal. And in between those is Social Media Action Day. And on Social Media Action Day, that's a day we'll have a toolkit for all of you where you can share out with everybody, tweet it, or is it still called tweet if it's not X it out, whatever it's called now. Use your social media platforms to share. We'll have messages for you, but it's also a great rest day. We completely recognize that even though your meetings time-wise are not that long, they take a lot of energy, a lot of preparation, and you need to be able to recover and rest in between those two big days. So please take Social Media Action Day as a great way to do some passive advocacy. And lastly, Friday is Empower ME Day, which is a day where we like to pick a theme on, what I wish I would have known maybe before I got sick. And so we're really excited about this year's Empower ME Day. We're getting speakers, we're gathering everything we need. So that's a day for you to come. And again, you can just attend speakers and workshops virtually, attend as you'd like. No signups are needed. So a day-by-day schedule breakdown, I'm not going to talk through all of this, but this is pretty much what we just went through, where Monday is the office hours. Tuesday, you'll have your remote meetings with the Senate. On Wednesday, Social Media Action Day. Again, low energy pathway. Thursday is your House Advocacy Day. And Friday is Empower ME. This is the schedule I was looking for. So again, the Empower ME sessions, these, just to really clarify here, the Empower ME days are not any type of meetings with legislators. This is like, we did our Senate day, we did our House day, we did our social media blast day. And now here's a time where we can come back and as a community get together and share our resources and share what's helped us. And we'll have a main speaker as well as two breakout panels where you can hopefully take something home with you that helps make your life better. But again, to be clear, Empower ME Day is not a day that you're doing any type of meetings with legislators. Okay, so the meat and potatoes of today. I just want to let you know, so I'm going to go over the storytelling training, and then at the end, we're going to turn off the recording and we're going to open it to questions. So if you have questions as this is coming up, one, I highly recommend dropping it into the chat because we have Monique, Raquel, and Emily on who can answer your questions in real time. And if you aren't able to drop it in the chat or you want to save it to ask at the end, you can absolutely do that. But just know we're holding off on questions spoken during the presentation until the end. But the chat is always available to drop your questions and the team can answer as I go. Storytelling do's and don'ts. So first we're going to go over do's and don'ts and some just best practices. And then I will also be sharing with you a storytelling worksheet. The storytelling worksheet will walk you through like a methodology to be able to prepare and share your story most effectively. So right now we're kind of going over just best practices, and then I'll give you the template that you can take after this meeting and work on in the next couple weeks to figure out how you're going to tell your personal story and tying it in with our advocacy asks. So do's and don'ts. 1, be honest and authentic. Really, you're here to tell your story. So whatever that means to you and whatever experience you've had, that is what's most valuable to the legislators or the legislative team that you're telling it to. So if it's something feels authentic and true to you, that's okay to share. There are these other stipulations as we go down and I'll go through it, but really you don't have to think about how should I sound, just sound like you. Tell your story as if you would be telling a friend who's unfamiliar with your story. Similarly, make it personal. It's 100% okay to make these stories emotional because chances are that they are emotional for you. The journey that you have experienced with your disease or as a caregiver or as a friend and ally, that's your story and your story alone. And you wouldn't be here if it didn't mean something to you. So it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to share that raw aspect of your story. And I would also say that that's often what legislators and their team remember the most. They're not going to remember how polished you were, how perfect you said in saying everything. They're going to remember the rawness and the realness of your story. That being said, when we're trying to figure out what we want to share, we want to make sure we're always tying back our stories and our experiences to the asks. Why are we here? It's not just to share this horrible thing that happened to us or these struggles that we've had, we're trying to say, look, this is what I'm going through, and this is why we need this. This is exactly why this story is related to this solution that we want you to support today. Again, the storytelling worksheet will help us go through that. And then do repeat the tagline. The tagline is going to be part of our Advocacy Day asks. We're not going to go into the details and nitty gritty of our Advocacy Day asks. I'm sorry. My apologies. Right now, but we will have those ready for you where you will have a tagline and your talking points and all of that ready to go. But again, the point is that we keep tying it back to the asks. Some don'ts. We really want to stick to the facts. So I guarantee you that your experience just by sticking to the facts will tell the story in itself. We don't want to be loading on negativity, even though maybe that's valid and that is what you experienced and that is how you feel. But for somebody listening to that story, they might just want you to get out of their office. They're going to be like, okay, done with this meeting. Oh man, let me tell you about those MECFS long COVID advocates. That was a long meeting. We want to leave a really positive impression because the more that they care about you, the more that they're going to want to push and support our advocacy efforts. I totally understand that that's kind of a tricky balance. So I'm not saying to not share hard things that happen to you, but you can share them by just being very factual about what happened, as opposed to really emphasizing how negative it was and how hard it was and kind of the woe is me. It's more like, this is really hard, but hey, I'm still here fighting. And you kind of become that person that they want to fight for too. Similarly, we don't want to get distracted or connect to unrelated topics. Really sticking to why we're there, what we're asking. We don't want to kind of jump into any other unrelated legislation. We don't have that much time. So really focusing on why we're there is important. Even though there might be another legislative effort or maybe something that particular representative did that's kind of related to your story, let's leave it out. We just want to really focus on why we're there. We also don't want to make accusations or assumptions. That can be, their Senator X has voted this way in the past. So we want to make sure that this time they don't do that. Like, we don't want to make any assumptions about how the office will feel about our ask. And we don't want to make any accusations also, because again, that doesn't leave a good taste in their mouth and it doesn't make them want to fight for you and come to bat for you. If during the meeting you hear another advocate say something that you're like, I don't agree with that, or I don't think that's right, or anything like that, just let it go. If it's something that's very important that needs to be clarified, make a note of it. You'll always be, if these are virtual, you can have a pen and paper, which we'll recommend actually, to the side. Just make a note of it and then share with your team lead, and the team lead will share with us or share directly with us, so that if we do need to go back and correct something that was said that's really important, we can do that with that office. But we don't want to do it during the meeting because it looks like we're not agreeing. It's kind of causes confusion. And again, we're very limited on time. So again, just maybe make a note of it, but we don't want to make those disagreements public or during those meetings. We understand completely the nature of these diseases. It's so important that you're just there. Even if you're there and you are camera off, if you're lying down, if you get to that moment and you have complete brain fog and it all escapes you, it's so important just to have your little square in that meeting, because you represent another person, another voice there. So just you showing up is really a huge, it will mean a lot to the team as a whole and will make our case even stronger. And it's okay to just say that day, this quote on the bottom: "I'm not well enough to share today, but I stand with my fellow advocates. Please help us address this public health crisis." So you can always have that sentence ready if when it comes to that meeting, or let's say you had 2 meetings already and by the third one you're spent, it's okay to just share that line alone, because that is better than you not making the meeting. I guarantee you. A few more do's. And you'll notice some of these are a little bit repetitive, but it's because they're so important. So get your messages in early and succinctly. We really just want to go in, bing, bang, boom. Here's our message. Here's our story. This is why it ties back into our message. And by the way, thank you so much. Here's our message again. We'll go through a little bit more of the training for it, and your team lead will really help with this. But we just want to make sure from the very get-go, we get in our messages early and clearly. Also, it can be really intimidating to do these meetings, but just remember that you're an expert in your own story. There is nobody in the entire world who is better suited to share your story than you are. So you don't ever have to question your own story. It is yours. It is valid. No one can take that away from you. I think for me, at least, having that knowledge going into a meeting like this really helped reassure me, like, okay, you know what? No matter what, I don't need to know the ins and outs of this legislation. I don't need to know exactly the terminology that I need to use, or the details of our advocacy ask. I just need to know my story. And that's really why you're there. Keeping it brief, less is more. Really, like it will feel like you barely spoke, but usually when you have a chance to tell your story and just sticking to the facts, that's all that the team or the legislative team needs to hear, because that's what they'll remember. We do want to answer a little bit more than yes or no. Again, tying it into your story, making it personal is really what's important. And then do flag your main points. I'll get to that in a second. Using anecdotes to demonstrate credibility. Again, I know I'm saying the same thing. It's your story. Showing how this actually affects their constituents is what's going to make them care. And your personal stories are what they remember. I get, like, at the end of the meeting, they might not remember everything that specifically we're asking them to do or asking them to support, but our team will follow up with the correct one pagers and what we want from them. But they'll remember, oh yeah, okay, I remember Jill. I remember her story. This was this meeting that we had. Oh yeah, I definitely want to pass that on to the senator, or I definitely, whatever it is, they'll remember that. And be engaging, which I think you all pretty much are. And especially when you're so invested in a cause, you're showing that you are engaged in the meetings goes a long way. Going back to the flagging, again, it's bringing it back to our main point. I have some examples listed on the slide of words or sentences that you can start with to just go back to the fact, because it could be that maybe somebody on your team, another advocate, is kind of going off off center and talking about something else, which it can happen, and we completely understand. But if you, then it's your turn to talk, maybe just going back to, like, what this boils down to is this. The key point is this. Let me underscore this. Or you find yourself starting to meander, you can just take a break and say, you know what, I want to get back to the main reason we're here is blank. So feel free. Again, I personally write these sentences down, and I have like a little flagging asterisk. So if I get off topic, I can just look at my notes and say, okay, I can just use this sentence and fill in right where I need to go and come back to our main topic. Some storytelling don'ts, again, repeating the negative. We really want to leave a good taste in their mouth, or we want them to feel really invested in helping you. So saying that you have, or just sticking to your facts about your story in itself will portray the negative sides of it, if that makes sense. Another way to think about it is you want to share your story as succinctly and as effectively as possible, and tying it back to the legislation. And if we waste a lot of our time just talking about how like only the negative sides of it, that's more what legislators will remember as opposed to, oh, this person experienced hardships. They're asking for this. I really liked them and I cared about them, and I want to make sure that we can support something that helps people like them. We want to stick to our messages. Again, once we start kind of going off topic or jumping into so many different asks, so many different things, it can be confusing to to the people that we're trying to get our main 1, 2, 3 messages tops across. Just as a more of a detail, we at Solve, like we are not lobbyists and we are not lobbying for anything. We are advocates and we're advocating. The terminology is important. If you find you accidentally slip and say lobbying, you can always say, I meant advocating, but it's not a huge deal. But again, just to clarify, we're advocating for X, not lobbying. Similarly, kind of going almost like too fancy and going into sales or marketing jargon or just trying to impress the team that you're presenting to is not really the way to go. We're not looking to impress. We're not looking to do anything except really share our raw story. So going back to being authentic and being true to ourselves, we do want to keep the language clean and professional, but that doesn't mean, sprinkling in extra words that required a thesaurus search before the meeting, if that makes sense. We've all read those sentences when we're like, wait, so what do they mean? Why didn't they just say this? That's what we mean. We want to keep it professional. We want to keep it clean, absolutely. But really just telling your story as it is what matters. We also don't want to leave any gray area. If you just in general, if there's a projects in the works or something that you don't want to answer directly, we don't want to have any gray, unclear responses, because that's what they'll remember is like, well, they didn't really answer this question, or that was kind of weird. I don't know what that was. That feeling that people get when they leave, we want to come across as very clean, as very clear, and as people that would inspire empathy and inspire someone to want to fight for you because they see that you've gone through so much and you're still fighting for yourself and you're still fighting for this community. So jumping into our, excuse me, our storytelling worksheet. We're not going to go through all of this. And I also recognize it's probably a little bit hard to see. We're going to drop in the chat the link to this document so you can download it and go through it in your own time. I just want to very briefly go over how this works. So this storytelling worksheet can help you get all of your experiences that you've had and boil it down into a clear, succinct story that ties back into our advocacy asks. Because again, you don't have very much time. And what we're trying to do is tell your story or a piece of your story in the most effective way. There are 3 different workshops that you can work through that kind of help get all of the noise and all of the story into a concise way to tell it. So for example, you'll start with a timer where you're really just recording your story as it goes, just everything that comes out. Then you're going to select important themes that you see come out. Like, oh, you know what? I really talked about the impact on my career and the financial impact on my family. Like that's really what I saw come up a lot. So it helps to just highlight that because you experienced it, but sometimes you never got the chance to put it all out there and identify the themes and identify the important subjects that are coming out. So that way you can see, you know what, this really is actually the main point of my story. I'm sorry. Then in workshop 2, you'll navigate the way your experiences with your illnesses. Think about the way you navigate your experience with your illnesses. Again, we're going to pull out some like larger social and political identities that might come up in your story. And then once you have these broader topics and broader ideas that you realize that your story really resonates with, we're going to see, okay, how does that tie specifically into our policy ask today? And then once you have that, again, the next steps will be able to kind of cut your story down more and more, or to maybe be able to give a brief overview and then a specific anecdote that really ties it in to our ask. I highly recommend, if you have a chance in the next week or so, to take the time to start on this project. It can be time consuming and it can be energy consuming emotionally too, because we're asking you to tell your story. But I will also say the feedback that we have gotten from the storytelling worksheet is overwhelmingly positive, in that it's also helped people outside of Advocacy Week, because it gives them the space to take a step back from their story, to almost like recreate like an ownership over their story, because they can identify certain things and big themes in it, and also to see how their story can be used in an advocacy area to like really push and fight for the objectives that we're all here for today. So I hope that makes sense, but definitely take some time with that. When we do our, I'm sorry, I keep moving. There we go. When we do your coordination calls, as well as the Zoom, there we go, the Zoom office hours on the Monday of Advocacy Week, that's a great time if you have your story ready. That can be a time to come and bring it in with the team and just practice on us. We're happy to hear it. It's actually a joy to hear everyone's story, because that's why we're here. Everyone's story is so powerful. But if you have any questions on it, feel free to run it past us, or you can always send a message to Raquel. We can set up a one-on-one meeting if we need to. There's a lot of ways that we can do this. We can also practice with other advocates in our region. That's a great way to connect with other advocates, but you also get to polish that story. I would also highly recommend, if you have a chance before that, try it with your partner, with your caregiver, with your son or daughter, a friend, anything like that. Just the more you can tell your story, the more you can get feedback and polish it, the better. Okay. Oh, and then the bridging technique. So no, as it happens, sometimes it can come up where there's a negative or unhelpful question. Right now you see interviewer, but this could be your legislative staff that you're meeting with. So it's okay to kind of move forward. We don't want to get stuck in the trenches of a question that really doesn't come back to why we're there. So, excuse me. So you can always say, I don't know about that, but what I do know is, and then boom, back to the legislation that we're there for, or back to our main point, back to our tagline, or just directly, our real focus today is block, block, block. That's what we want to keep the focus on. So again, I sometimes write the bridging technique notes just to the right. So if I see that they ask a question to me or to our team, especially if you're a team lead, I would keep these questions right on hand, or these bridging technique terminology. So that way you can keep the meeting on track. To the right of the screen, you can kind of also see, like, we want to acknowledge also that they've said, like, yes, and furthermore, blah, 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 we're coming back to this, or I understand what we're here today is for XYZ. We really want to deliver the core message and stop. There it is. And a few protocols, just some like best practices. So it says arrive on time or early. Arrive early. As you know, like, the technology will always, something happens on the most important meetings. So please arrive early. It doesn't hurt. You're just hang out in a virtual room. But if you can, and if it's at all possible, please arrive early to your meetings. It also helps because each meeting you'll probably have a different team than the previous meeting. So you're meeting with the people in your group are different advocates. So that's a great time to, point number 2, introduce yourselves. There will be a group lead in every single group. And so having them introduce themselves and also just identify all the constituents is really important. You may be in a meeting where, let's say I'm Arizona and I'm in an Arizona meeting with my senator. There might be somebody who doesn't live in Arizona. They could live in Michigan, but they're joining my team to be able to support our story. We want to make sure that we first identify the constituents when we start the meeting. So that's a job for the group lead. You want to wait for the staffers to address the group. You'll welcome and open the meeting. And right away, you want to begin with the constituent because the staffers, they will care about the person in Michigan, but they really care about the voter in Arizona. So as much as possible, focusing on the constituents and saying like, this person lives in Tucson, Arizona, and this is their story. Be prepared to go around the room and call on people. It helps as much as possible if everyone's staying within their time limits when they're telling their stories. But the team lead can also be able to kind of navigate that a little bit and just make sure that we all have time to speak and to share our story. And then after the meeting, you will send a thank you note and fill out a meeting report. That is all through the Advocacy Associates app. So you're not emailing people or doing anything else. It's all built in for you. We'll go over more of that, like on the logistics training, but just know that's all taken care of for you, but you do need to do it. And rest between meetings, rest on your Wednesday between your Senate and House day. And take the rest that you need. We know this is a huge ask for people that have energy limiting disabilities. It's a huge ask, and it's not one that we as a community make lightly and asking of each other. And we want to make sure we give that space for that rest. One thing I didn't touch upon, and I just want to make sure I do because we're pretty much at the end of the main presentation, is if you are asked a question that you don't know the answer to, it is 100% okay to say, that's a great question. I don't have the answer for that, but let me write it down and I'll make sure we get back to you after this meeting. Let's share contact information at the end. And then if you can make sure that that question gets back to our team and we can follow up with that office. They do remember, I guarantee you, they do remember when you say, I'm going to follow up with you on that. And it means a lot, and it goes a very long way when we do follow up with them. It's not something that you will need to do personally. You just have to pass on the message to us, and we'll make sure that we find the answer out and we get back to them. But it really shows that we're invested, we're following up, things like that. Similarly, any legislative questions you don't have the answers to, when you're meeting with the staff, I think sometimes it's easy to forget. They might forget that not everyone works on the Hill, so they might throw out acronyms or short terminology that you might not know. It's okay to just say, excuse me, do you mind explaining what this is? They'll appreciate that. Shows that you're engaged, and that they will also kind of have that kind of check on themselves, which is totally fine, and they appreciate that engagement. It's not meant to be an intimidating meeting. They really want to get to know you. They're not trying to speak over you or intimidate you. And likewise, us in the MECFS and long COVID communities have so many acronyms ourselves. So that's another reminder when you go in and you might be using short terminology, they might not know. The staffers might have no idea what you're talking about. So remember to break things down the other way as well, and be prepared for them to maybe ask you questions, but also as much as possible, we want to keep things very simple, very professional, and very understandable for people that don't live and breathe in this space. Those are all the main points I wanted to go over today. So with that, I think we can go ahead and stop the recording and answer any questions that we have. Thank you, everyone.